Okay, when you look at what it truly takes to deliver a hyperscale data center today, what would you say are the most underestimated complexities that owners and operators often don't see or think about, so, too late in the process, I suppose?
Yeah, I think, especially as more data centers are coming online and a lot of owners have bought, where there's land in rural areas, but then how do you actually get people there to go build the work? And, it has definitely unique challenges of requiring, thousands of workers to go build these sites, and especially, the skilled trades of electricians and mechanical trades, but also, as I work for a general contractor, of bringing, superintendents and people on site to be able to do that, and making sure that we have the resources and people. And I would also say, that weather in different locations is also a challenge of, how that can delay some projects or making sure that, we're all preparing for that. And then also just, I would say that the access to electricity, obviously with data centers of needing that and what are the right locations to build.
Okay, and the first thing you mentioned about the getting thousands of people there. So clearly, the hyperscale projects aren't so location sensitive. So whereas once upon a time, building in or next to a city was the thing, these are being built in more rural regions. So you've mentioned the challenge. So how do you address that? How do you get the construction teams, thousands of skilled trade workers to, arrive? Do you have to build a small village and all live? Just what are the logistics of getting folks to where the data center needs to be built?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting challenge to, figure out how to be able to do that. So obviously there's, some in, even an hour outside of a city, but then you can be, which you think is close, but it is further away where people are traveling and people are away from, their families or things like that. And so there's definitely different things that, we have to look at, whether it's do you provide some kind of temporary housing, where are areas that, could people bring, whether it's, their fifth wheel or things like that of how they're going to stay, but also where is the, the infrastructure of um, where there are places to eat and things like that. So really working with the local communities and but then figuring out how that's going to work. So it definitely is a challenge, and then incentivizing people to go there. So sometimes when you think of, oh well, it's in a rural area, I got some inexpensive land, it should be less expensive. It can actually be more expensive to build the data center there because you have to pay the travelers more money to be able to go to those locations. And so sometimes people aren't really thinking about that. They think, oh, the cost of living here is less, but you're actually bringing in people from higher cost of living areas. So a lot of times it's really about providing incentives and per diem packages to people to go there.
Yeah, and you also mentioned the weather, which I know clearly well, climate change, I think most folks acknowledge it, and therefore we're getting more extremes in weather. So in terms of the weather resilience, how can Skanska plan for extreme weather, whether that's just knowing that in certain periods it's going to be either too hot or too cold? And also you mentioned the electricity. So how part two, can you ensure uninterrupted access to electricity, which, as you say, maybe in these more remote locations isn't there or isn't available in plentiful supply when it comes to the construction?
Yeah, I think at first on the electricity, obviously, that's a key driver. And at Skanska, we purchase renewable energy certificates at every site, kind of offsetting those on-site electricity consumption. Really by injecting that renewable power into the grid, I think is really important. How do we have those long-term strategies for electricity? A lot of owners are looking at different ways to be able to provide power, and really so that it's not on the local power grid, but is there ways to have power just at the site? And so there's just a lot of advancement that's happening there. And I think on the weather side, so I live in Portland where obviously it rains. And I think here we're used to a lot of the rain and how do you adjust? But I also do a lot of work in Arizona where it is extremely hot. And also, they can kind of have those monsoons where all of a sudden it's just a complete and utter downpour. And so for there, we're really adjusting to starting really early in the morning. And a lot of times we're done by noon because it's just so hot there to be able to, work around some of those things. And obviously you have a lot of this equipment that it needs to stay conditioned, and how do you make sure that you do that? And so we have a lot of temporary cooling and things like that. But also when you build data centers, it's all about the particles. And so when you're building in a place that's like Arizona in the desert, there's a lot of dust. And so really having those mitigation plans of setting it up and keeping the site really clean, so that we are able to turn the sites over and execute the work. But I would also say that a lot of the places have been in the south, but there's a lot more that they're looking at in the north, right, where there can be cold weather and extremes like that. And so looking at how do we schedule those so that you're not doing the excavation in the middle of the winter, and so working with owners to be able to do that and make sure that people understand what some of those limitations are.
Yeah, and do you have to sort of factor in a best guess, or I don't know if you've got enough data, to allow a bit of extra time for either, as you say, maybe slightly shorter working days because it's either too hot by, as you say, lunchtime, or it's too cold, but- or do you sort of still quote the same time, but sort of with a little clause, be aware that there might be some extreme, weather conditions that disrupt this schedule.
A lot of times when we're working where it's really hot, I mean, we can be starting at 2 in the morning, right? So that we're working early shifts to be done then by noon. So we still have to go and execute and get the work done. And it's really interesting because a lot of people who work in those really extreme warm climates, they're used to that type of schedule where they're getting up and being done so that they can execute the work then. And obviously, once we get the building, enclosed, right, then we can switch to some different hours. And obviously it's the exterior work.
And in terms of workforce development, obviously we talked about getting thousands of people, but that assumes that you can get the right, well, quantity of skilled people to do that. And clearly the industry, whether it's in the US or globally, I think that there's a shortage and an acknowledgement that there's a sort of aging workforce for a lot of this. So as a company, Skanska, what in particular are you doing to recruit, train, and I guess even retain that specialized labor needed for these large scale data center projects, which are increasingly frequent, I guess.
Yeah, I think that one, it's about people's sort of view of the construction industry, right? And people have sometimes a negative view of what construction is like. And it's, I've been in this industry 30 plus years, right? And, I think having people see what a great industry it is. And so we've been doing some different things where we've partnered even with some of our hyperscale clients, doing different days, at trade colleges, at community colleges, meeting with high school students to really kind of show them the type of work that's out there. And so really doing different community-based and really being involved in the community and talking about the good type of work that there is. We're also involved with the ACE mentorship program, which really brings in high school students really into the construction trades and really looking at the construction industry. So really, I think it's starting in when students are younger, and also construction is such a unique industry that when people are thinking, okay, I'm done with high school, what am I going to do next? and maybe they don't want to go to college or they don't have the funds to do that, is construction is so great is that you go, you get paid while they're training you, right? So there's not a lot of other places where you can get a highly paid job where they're paying you to go do that and go learn the work. And so, for me, it's interesting how some people think that college is kind of the only way to go, but really, this is such a great opportunity for people.
And do you think the data center specifically, I guess you work across a broad range of sectors, but do you think the data center industry could perhaps, is it still too nervous of the negative sort of image that it may have, as opposed to getting a bit more on the front foot and saying, we basically underpin the digital world and it's an exciting place to come and work in. Do you think there needs to be a slight rebalancing of that, or do you understand why they're a little bit reticent to tell folks what they do because they don't want to sort of pile on from all the people that say they're taking, you're taking our power and water, etc.
It's interesting because I think that data centers have got a lot of negative press in that, and typically when we talk about water, they're recycling the water. I mean, all these large tech companies know how to do that, so it's not like they're actually consuming the water, right? It's being treated and really brought back. I think as far as the power, and that's what I talked about of really using, like, how do we use renewable power? How do we look at different ways to power the data centers? And so where I think that there is definitely some negativity, that there's a lot of great things that are happening and really advancing how we build, how we're more efficient in construction, but also how we're using power. And so, I mean, this is where I would say data centers and semiconductors are driving the economy right now. The US would be in a recession if AI wasn't happening, right? And all of this work wasn't happening. And so, how do we make sure that we get people into the industry? Because this is, honestly where the jobs are at.
When you say doing a great deal of things, I mean, again, I'm not an expert in construction, but as far as I'm aware, the modular construction, the skid-based systems are helping to reshape how the data centers are built. So, how Skanska, in particular, using modularization even to improve quality, reduce on-site labor hours, which we talked about a bit earlier, I guess, and accelerate project schedules. Just how big an impact can the modularity of data center builds and the skid-based systems make on the sector?
Yeah, I would say it's so important when we talked about the labor, right? The availability of labor, right? And how do you bring people and maybe to, different locations, right? Is that, and especially there's these pockets where data centers are being built. And so you have other locations where there's people available, right? And so, I would say I've done a lot of data center tech, semiconductor type work, and we've been doing this type of modular systems where we do, chiller assemblies and exhaust systems and really kind of do these offsite sort of modular skids, whether it's the racking in the data centers and putting that all together, that helps, so that it's really just like you bring it to the site and you plug it in, right? Instead of having to do all of this work there, where, like we talked about, it can be dusty, that can have issues, right? And so you bring all of that in, and really having it manufactured in a controlled environment, right? I've gone around to a bunch of our trade partners, but also other companies that have really embraced this. And so they have, their large shop where they're putting all these skids together, shipping it off, right? And that's helping a lot with the labor on site.
Yes, obviously you're kind of in effect bringing the work to where the talent is, but then that maybe creates a bit of a logistical problem because you've got these fairly large modular units that need to get to site. So just how it's changing project logistics from bringing, I guess, a load of raw materials to site and then a largish, part of a building or whatever it is. And then does it have an impact one way or the other, sustainability wise, on the profile of the data center build?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because you would be, shipping all of this material in and doing that. And so this is actually helped by building it in a location and getting all of the material there and then shipping it to the site. And what's actually happening is um, there's these locations where people are doing it, and it's not necessarily, it's not like, oh, I'm shipping it across the country. A lot of times it's one or two states over where one state has all of this data center work, another place doesn't. And so they're utilizing those resources. And so it's actually helping to be able to look at, kind of the feasibility of doing this work. And we also has it's called the EC3. It's an embodied carbon calculator, and it really and is available to anyone to use. And it really looks at what your sustainability is, where the materials are coming from, how are you doing that, and that really helps so people can see sort of that overall supply chain sustainability. But by doing the modular, it's going to help as far as because people also if they're if you need more people there, that also drives sustainability and things like that of how are they transporting there. And so if you can really reduce some of that but bringing the material to the site, that's going to help.
And clearly, the data center boom is AI driven. But the good thing is, well, obviously, you're not only building data centers to host AI, but I suspect you're using it as well, the construction industry. So perhaps you can share as much as you can in terms of what Skanska's doing with AI. I know you've got tools like Safety Sidekick. So just, I guess, everything from the design, safety, streamlining field operations. Give us a flavor of how AI is helping to transform the way you do work.
Yeah, AI is such a driver in our business, and I think especially of how do we make construction um, just more productive and drive that productivity. And so I would say yes, as you mentioned, our Safety Sidekick, we have an AI tool that really ties in what our clients are looking for, maybe what OSHA is, what our own safety policy is. So really the information is there when a superintendent or project manager or trades are looking at something that they can just go on their phone and all of the data is there to be able to, what do I do in this situation? Or how should I mitigate these risks or things like that? And so that's really helped. We also have just our own internal operational AI tools. So operational sidekick, where it's the same type of thing where, we're going to install equipment. We're doing testing for commissioning. We want to check on quality. And so all of that data and information is there. So what is the process to be able to do this? How do I make sure that I start this equipment up right? The checklist, everything is there. And so really to be able to do that. And we're working with also, as you mentioned, our design firms of how are we using AI to, a lot of times, these projects are going so fast. How do you have the design completed and things like that? So using AI to check over the design and make sure that everything is ready to go build because these projects are so fast, right? And we don't have time to ask questions and RFIs and what do we do next? It's really checking the design initially, and that's helped save a lot of time as well.
And in terms of the future, just anything you can share about what you think's coming down the sort of line in terms of data center construction innovation. We talked about AI and various other things, but is there anything else you can see on the horizon that's going to further transform the way data center projects are delivered, and also how Skanska's positioning itself for the whatever the future might hold?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because right now there can be all of these different designs, and so then you're trying to figure out different projects and working with. I think that they're going to really have to have repeatable, scalable designs, right? So that you know exactly, and obviously as things evolve and things like that, there needs to be changes. But how do you make sure that you can just go build and build and really have that prefabricated modular type construction, so it's easy to that you can just take these kind of plug and play components and you're installing them and having them ready to go, so that you're not relearning things when it's really a similar project. And I think AI is exponentially going to change how construction is being done, which is going to tie into really these data center projects when they are very similar. Because a lot of times for construction, you're building one project and you're not necessarily building that same project again. And these are where you're doing that. And so I really think that AI tools are going to improve, the design and the quality and how do we accelerate schedules, make the job site safer. Especially, this is such a great opportunity when it is these repeatable projects to be able to do that. And then you can see one project after another of where you have those gains. I think it's also, as we talked about sustainability of just making sure we have sustainable materials. How do you have materials that are close by the job site? How do we make sure that we keep the supply chain where it needs to be?
Yeah, and with the AI, I mean, I'm wondering, I'm sure we've all, played with AI and done various things. And clearly you can ask it, you can give it a load of info and say, please do this for me, build whether it's build a PowerPoint presentation or whatever. I mean, do you think we'll ever get to that stage where you can put in all the key parameters for a data center, how many megawatts capacity, footprint, what it's got to include, and then just, leave it for an hour to crunch all that data and then it'll come back with a data center design? Or do you think they'll always and then obviously a human can sort of, tweak it accordingly. Do you think we can get to that stage, or is that a little bit sort of too adventurous at this moment, at least?
I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen sooner than what we think. I think with these types of things where you can, say that you want so many megawatts of a data center in this geographical location, and this is what you're looking for. I think that's going to happen. I think um, which will help with these sort of repeatable designs. And obviously, as everyone and you mentioned knows, is that you need a human to check the AI and make sure that it's correct. But I think also of how do we do with AI to help where so much is the construction on-site labor, and so how do we help accelerate some of those things so that there doesn't need to be as many people of the shortage there, but that people that are there are doing, the tasks. And really I see kind of AI getting rid of some of those administrative tasks so people can actually focus on the risk, the safety, the execution, getting the jobs done, making sure that our schedules are right.
And just finally, perhaps in terms of Skanska, I mean, do you have plans to expand your data center operations? And I'm not sure, what areas you cover, but to expand geographical coverage, etc., because of this, boom, and you want to respond to it, or are you sort of comfortable where you are at the moment? And just anything you can share.
Yeah, I mean, we have been expanding where our projects are in the US. And so looking at where, some of our current clients are, what makes sense. We've been partnering a lot where our current offices are so that, for us, that makes sense where we know the trade partners there, we know the jurisdictions, we know the local market and things like that. And so for us, it's really partnering with those local offices and seeing what makes sense, because obviously then, as we talked about, how do you get people there? Well, it's a lot easier when we have people there, we know the trades there, and to be able to go execute that work.
Excellent. Oh, it's been great to chat, and thank you so much for talking about a topic which I expect a lot of people don't, give too much consideration, but there's clearly a lot of logistics involved on the construction side and a lot of variables to consider. So it's been great to have your insights. So thanks so much for your time, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.